Hello, my name's Kacey and welcome to your first installment of Yoga 101. Now this is designed to give you the confidence to practice either at home or in the studio, to give you some background knowledge and skills and alignment techniques to then take into your classes with you. So we're going to start with some basics today. So when you come in to practice yoga, whether you're at home or at the studio, yoga mat is probably the main thing that you'll be using for your yoga practice. But just so you're aware of the other props and equipment that you can use to support your practice. So when you're coming into dynamic classes like slow flow, flow or hot, then you have got things like a yoga block, which essentially brings the floor closer up to you. So you might be doing some poses where you need a little bit more height or you can't quite reach the ground. So something like a yoga block can help bring the floor closer towards you. So a block can be really handy in those dynamic classes and also in yin practice to give you more support in different deep stretches. So a yoga block. You might also see that we have straps. So yoga straps are used occasionally in class when we need a little bit more length. And so for example, you might be coming into a stretch where you might not be able to touch your toes, whereas a strap will just start to assist you to come into a type of stretch or a position to once again give you some more support. Now, a lot of the time your teacher will tell you if you need to grab any of those props as you come into class as well. You'll also see that we have bolsters. So bolsters are used mostly in our yin yoga classes. So they are used as big cushion supports that we do poses over. So we can drape ourselves over the bolster and relax and feel supported as we make these different shapes in the yoga poses. So those are used in yin more than anything else. And we also have yoga blankets. So yoga blankets are used mostly in yin as well. So this is just another way to give you a little bit of support, whether you roll it up or keep it folded or to lengthen it out to put over you in relaxation as well. So that's a quick little rundown on yoga props and options when you are practicing yoga, just so that you know what they are and what they do. And yoga itself, you'll hear in class that we use obviously the English terms for different poses, but you'll also start to hear some terms that you might not quite understand to start with, because yoga is rooted deeply, its origins in India. And an ancient Indian language of Sanskrit is what a lot of the yoga poses will also be known as. Like for example, chair pose in English will be Utkatasana in our Sanskrit language. So when you come into class, you may also hear some of the teachers using the Sanskrit terms for poses, the Indian terms, as well as the English names for poses as well. So if you're not quite sure what some of those are, don't worry, we do say the English name as well. But we do obviously respect the lineage of yoga coming from those, from its origins. Okay, so you will also see that when you come into class, we also do things that are breathing techniques or pranayama. Now in particular, our hot classes will always have an element of pranayama, a breathing exercise. So for example, it might be a simple inhale and exhale that the teacher leads you through. They might retain the breath. It could be inhaling in through the nose, out through the mouth, but we guide you through all of that. So pranayama is a breathing exercise. When we come into our flow type classes, you might also hear a teacher quite often talk about finding your ujjayi breath. So your ujjayi breath is essentially an oceanic type sound at the back of your throat. So it's almost like if you're trying to fog up a mirror in front of you, that breathing out, but imagine doing that with your lips closed. So it's a deep breath in and out through the nose, but you're essentially creating that oceanic sound in the back of your throat. This is a heating breath. It's a pranayama that is quite often used in traditional yogas such as Ashtanga or VINYASA practice. It builds internal heat and fire. So if you do hear a teacher say that you can start to engage your ujjayi breath, that's what they're talking about. And you're more than welcome to join in or ask them if you have any questions, or for them to once again demonstrate for you. So we'll get started with a little bit of movement now that you have the basics on yoga equipment, props, Sanskrit as the ancient Indian terms that we use in class, and we will get moving into some alignment. So once again, this is to give you the basics for your body positioning, to give you confidence to come into your classes. Now, first of all, it's okay if you feel that you're not strong enough, that you're not flexible enough. It's okay if you can't touch your toes. One of the biggest things that we have for people coming into their first class is they feel quite apprehensive that they're not going to be able to do everything. And that's okay, you don't need to do everything. It's not about what shape you create, it's how you feel. As long as you can be on your mat and you can move and breathe, then the rest doesn't matter. You work with whatever your body is allowing you to move into. So we'll talk about VINYASA flow today. So VINYASA is essentially a flow from standing, and we move through almost like a push-up type movement and end up in down dog. So that might mean absolutely nothing to you right now, which is why we're going to go through it really slowly today. So when you do come into the mat, any time that you have your hands at shoulder width, that essentially means that your wrists will be directly underneath your shoulders. So right now, come to a seated or a kneeling position and put your arms directly out in front of you and your fingertips spread wide. So when your hands are down on the ground, we're making sure that we don't have our fingertips together. It's really hard to balance when your fingers are together compared to if you're spreading the fingertips out wide, and the effect that that has on your balance and the ability to find stability in those movements. So we're making sure that our hands aren't too narrow, but also that we're not out too wide. So directly putting wrists underneath shoulders. So just doing that now, bring your hands out as wide as your shoulders, fingertips spread nice and wide, and then start to just observe. We're trying not to dump all of the weight into the heel of the hand. You are pressing down through all 10 finger pads as well. And what that does is it evenly distributes the weight across the whole hand. And so from there, we're able to protect our wrists. When we come into any type of arm bends, which is what we call chaturanga, which is essentially a push-up type movement. So from here, bend your elbows behind you. So every time you come into chaturanga, so the Sanskrit name, English term is to come into bending through the elbow. So essentially it's a mini push-up. Elbows behind you, chest comes forward. So as you come into class for the first time, you might feel that you need to build some strength through the upper body. So tabletop and a little push-up is an option. From there, the next option is to come to plank with knees down on the ground. So from high plank, knees on the ground, and bending through the elbows. Now, if you're coming into full chaturanga, that's when you come into plank with the knees off the ground, and you're shifting the weight forward, shoulders come forward, bending through the elbows. So you can start to see the difference between the different levels that you can work towards, or you can scale back to depending on how you're feeling through your upper body. But every time, hands are at shoulder width, fingertips are spread wide, making sure that you're pressing down through all 10 finger pads as well as the heel of the hand. So we always have that even weight distribution. It's a really good habit for you to start right from now to make sure that you're protecting and stabilizing through your wrists. So from there, we're also creating external rotation with our shoulders. So we're making sure that we're rolling our shoulders down and back. So you're broadening through the chest and your collarbones. So even now, come back to your knees and bring your hands out in front and start to roll your shoulders inwards. See how that already starts to bunch up through your shoulders and your collarbones? We're trying to avoid that by now externally rotating your shoulders. So you're bringing the top of your humerus into your shoulder joint. So you're broadening through your chest space and finding that external rotation. This is the positioning that you're going to keep with your shoulders. Whether your arms are down, directly out in front, or overhead, making sure that you're not rolling the shoulders in, we're rolling them back and down. So that creates a stronger positioning and foundation for your practice to grow from. So coming back to your hands and knees. So this is tabletop, your hands and knees. Separate your hands underneath your shoulders with your fingertips spread and facing forward. Externally rotate your shoulders, so you're broadening through your collarbones. Now your head is level, so you're not dropping your chin down and you're not looking up. So just keep the head and neck in line with the rest of the spine. If you need to stay in tabletop, that's fine. If you can start to bring your knees back into a modified plank, we're going to keep the hips in line with the rest of the spine. And then you'll notice that if you keep that external rotation through your shoulders, when you bend your elbows, they will head towards the back of the room and your elbows will graze your rib cage as you come all the way to the ground. If you internally rotate through your shoulders, you'll notice that your elbows bend out to the side. So just experience that now so you know not what to do. So hands to the ground, internally rotate your shoulders, bend your elbows. See how they go out to the side? Just spend a moment looking down at your wrist. Do you notice that you have a really deep wrist crease on the outside of the hand, but the inside doesn't have much crease at all? So imagine the pressure that you are now putting on the outside of your wrist if you keep that internal rotation through the shoulders. Now find your external rotation and bend through the elbows, so the elbows are bending behind you. And just have another little peek at your wrist. Do you notice that your wrist crease is even? So the weight is more evenly distributed across the wrist, which means you're not focusing all of that weight into one area. So it's a much healthier and more stable position. So every time you come into chaturanga, down dog, external rotation through the shoulders. So when you bend your elbows, elbows bend behind you. So it's more of a tricep engagement rather than elbows out to the side. So come back to tabletop, hands and knees. Spread your fingertips nice and wide. If you can, scoot the knees slightly back to your modified plank. External rotation through your shoulders, press down through all 10 finger pads. Start to suck your belly in towards your spine so you're engaging your core. Shift the shoulders forward so that you're not bending the elbows back. We always bring the shoulders forward so that as you bend your elbows, they head towards the back of your mat, but your shoulders are coming forward and your forearm stays more vertical as you come all the way down. Bring your forehead to the mat. Now from here, you're already in the position to come into baby cobra. So you're going to engage your back muscles and lift your chest off the ground. So keep the elbows in next to the rib cage. Your hands should already be in the correct position. And there's a slight tuck of your chin just so the back of the neck has some length. And release, bring your head down to the mat. 2 more like that. Inhale, use your back strength to lift your chest. Now your feet are anchored. If your feet are lifting, let go of your glutes and focus on your spine strength. Let it go. 1 more, inhale to lift. Lift your chest, keep your feet anchored. You can lift your knees off the ground, but your feet are touching. And let it go. Now come back through your knees, so press through the hands, come back through your knees, and bring your knees out nice and wide and sink your hips down towards your heels. Keep your arms extended out long and bring your forehead back down to the mat. This is child's pose. Now you'll get to know child's pose as your ultimate rest pose. Child's pose is where you come to during any class if you just need a moment to rest, to find your breath, and then you can rejoin whenever you're ready. So please remember this pose because this is exactly where you come to at any stage if you just need a moment to rest. Arms extended, elbows can be on the ground if you really want to come into a passive variation and bring your forehead down to touch. And then from your child's pose, we're going to start to transition into downward facing dog. So you will do a lot of downward dogs if you're coming into any type of dynamic flow class or vinyasa flow class. So keeping your hands at shoulder width, fingertips spread, so same as your chaturanga, you're going to tuck your toes under and lift your hips towards the sky. Now essentially, you're creating a triangle, an upside down V or a triangle shape between your hands, your hips and your heels. Now, if you are feeling quite tight through the back of your legs, you'll find that if you have really tight hamstrings, then you'll tend to round through the upper back.
So if that's you and you're feeling really tight, it's actually better to bend your knees and lengthen through your spine. It's more important in your down dog to have a beautiful long spine than it is to have straight legs. Now, if you can keep your long neutral spine with the legs straight, that's fine, but otherwise just keep a bend through the knees. So you can see the difference. If you straighten your legs and you start to round and you lose that lumbar curve, the lower curve of your back, then it's just something to be aware of, and bend the knees slightly and find that length again. So that's your downward facing dog. Upside down V shape. You're still pressing down and forward through the hands. So you're making sure you're not always keeping all the weight in the heel of your hand. You are pressing down through the entire hand, all 10 finger pads as well. All right, so we'll start to bring some of that together. So coming down to your modified plank, fingertips spread wide, externally rotate your shoulders, engage your core, shift the weight forward so that you're bending your elbows alongside the rib cage, forearms stay vertical, and then inhale, come into your mini back bend. So this is your cobra. Use your back strength, keep your feet on the ground, elbows still tucked in. Bring your forehead back down to the mat, come back through your knees, tuck your toes to your downward facing dog. Your upside down V. Knees can be bent or straight, but really focus on lengthening through your spine. Beautiful. Now start to walk your feet up towards your hands. Bend your knees as much as you need to. And then toe heel your feet out to hip distance. Now we're going to measure this together. So bring 2 fists in between the balls of your feet. Now that essentially is hip distance for you, and it's a really good awareness for you to have, because that's also how wide your feet should be in your downward facing dog. So just looking at your feet now, noticing what hip distance is, just so you have that awareness and you can start to carry that through your practice. Now this is ragdoll. You can reach for your elbows if it feels good, maybe a slight movement from side to side. But we're opening up through the back line of the body. If this is too much, you bend your knees as much as you need to, but allow your head to be heavy. Beautiful. And then start to bring your feet together. So big toes are touching, a little bit of space between the heels. And we're going to lift and lengthen. So we're going to lift halfway. You might leave your hands on the ground. You might bring your hands to your shins, but just make sure they're not hovering. So whether the hands make contact with the earth or with your shins, just make sure that they're not in the air, and then fold forward, let it go. Let's do 2 more like that. Inhale, lift halfway, and pause. So you're rolling your shoulders back, once again broadening through your chest space. You're not bringing your torso up any higher than horizontal, so not lifting up too high. And you're also finding a beautiful neutral spine, so trying to flatten through your back. Roll your shoulders back. Fold forward, let it go. 1 more. Inhale to lift halfway, fingertips to the shins or the ground. Roll your shoulders back. Make sure you're not lifting up too high. Hands on the ground or hands on the shins. Beautiful. Let it go. This time come all the way to stand. So bend the knees if you need to. Sweep your arms towards the sky, palms touch. And bring your hands to heart center. So when we say hands to heart center, bringing the palms to touch and bringing your hands in front of your sternum in the middle of your chest. So this is where we're coming to our mountain pose, our standing pose. So you're standing up nice and tall here. You're lifting up through the crown of your head, rolling the shoulders down and back, neutral spine. And then you're engaging your quadriceps. So we're trying to not lock the knees out and hang out in our knee joint. It is a slight, tiny micro bend. So you can see the difference between locking your knees out and just keeping a slight micro bend, just so instead of hanging out in your knee joint, you're actually starting to activate your quadriceps to lift your kneecaps. So you're stabilizing and strengthening around your knees rather than just hanging out in that joint. So from here, hands to heart center, lifting up through the crown of your head, roll your shoulders down and back, neutral spine, engage your quadriceps, lift your kneecaps. Now even lift all 10 toes off the ground and feel the activation in the arches of your feet. Keep that activation and ground your toes back down towards the earth. Beautiful. So you're standing tall and proud, gently hugging muscles in towards bones. Then from here, as you inhale, lift your hands towards the sky, palms touch. As you exhale, we're going to swan dive forward. So bend the knees as much as you need to. Bring the hands through the heart with you all the way down to the ground, forward fold. Inhale to lift halfway. Roll your shoulders back, fingertips to the ground or the shins. Remember, they don't hover. And then bend your knees if you need to. You're going to step back into your high plank. Now, if you need to bring your knees down onto the ground, please do so. If you want to experience having the knees lifted, then you're coming into your full plank, the top of your push-up position. Shift the weight into your tippy toes so your shoulders come past your wrists. Then bend your elbows halfway, so to 90 degrees, L shape. And then, this time you have the option of coming into what we call upward facing dog. So you can see that this back bend is different to our cobra pose because the only things touching the ground are my hands and the tops of my feet. My thighs are lifted. I'm still rotating my shoulders down and back, and I'm pressing through my hands to lift the crown of the head towards the sky. So you're not sinking into this pose, you are uplifting. Now remember, this is just an option. If it doesn't feel good, you stay with cobra. So you come back down to this position here, elbows tucked in with your hips down on the ground. Either way, we're going to meet in downward facing dog. So if you're in upward facing dog, you're rolling over your toes, planting the feet onto the ground to your down dog, coming back to that upside down V shape between your hands, your hips and your heels. Remember, you can bend your knees to lengthen through the spine if you're really tight through the back of the legs. Then from here, you're going to come onto the balls of your feet, bend your knees, and you're starting to walk your feet up towards your hands. Big toes are touching. Inhale to lift halfway, roll your shoulders back. Exhale, fold forward. And then inhale, come all the way to stand, palms touch. And bring your hands to heart center. Beautiful. So you have just done a vinyasa flow. And in particular, that's called sun salutation A. So you'll see a lot of those type of movements in our flow classes. So whether it's slow flow, hot or flow. So let's run through that again. We'll do one round with the modification, and we'll do one round with the option to come into your full chaturanga and your upward facing dog. So big toes to touch, hands to heart center, standing tall and proud, lifting up through the crown of your head. As you inhale, hands towards the sky, palms touch. Exhale, bend the knees if you need to, swan dive forward, hands touch the ground. Inhale, lift halfway, fingertips to the ground or your shins. Make sure your torso is no higher than horizontal. And then step back into your high plank. Shift the weight into your tippy toes, knees to the ground, bend through the elbows, come all the way down onto the ground. Inhale, use your back strength, baby cobra, keep the elbows tucked in, feet are anchored. Bring your chin down, come back through the knees, tuck your toes, downward facing dog. Come up onto the toes, bend the knees, step your feet up to meet your hands. Inhale to lift halfway, shoulders back. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, come all the way to stand, palms touch overhead, and bring your hands to heart center. Sun salutation A. We're going to do one more round, this time the option for your full chaturanga and your upward facing dog. As you inhale, hands towards the sky, palms touch. Exhale, swan dive forward, bend the knees as much as you need to, fingertips touch the earth. Inhale to lift, make sure your hands aren't hovering. Then step back into your high plank, option to keep the knees up, shift the weight into your tippy toes, shoulders come forward, bend the elbows to 90 degrees. Bring the chest up and forward into your upward facing dog, only the hands and feet are touching the mat. Exhale, hips towards the sky, down dog. Turn the toes over and you're now on the feet, creating your upside down V shape. Come up onto the balls of your feet, bend your knees, step the feet up to meet the hands. Inhale to lift and lengthen. Exhale to fold forward. Inhale, come all the way to stand, palms touch overhead, and bring your hands to heart center. So that gives you a bit of knowledge on vinyasa flow, sun salutations.
And just remember that some of the main points you need to keep in mind as you build these good habits with your practice is that external rotation of the shoulders. So making sure that every time you bend your elbows in chaturanga, the elbows are behind you, not out to the side. So you're not putting strain on the wrists and the shoulders as well. External rotation, bending the elbows. When you're coming onto your hands, making sure that you don't keep all of the weight in the heel of the hand, you have the whole hand and the finger pads all pressing down to distribute the weight more evenly. That will help to protect your wrists as well. And just be kind to yourself. It takes time to build body awareness and positioning, and also to build strength and stability. So modify as much as you need to for as long as you need to. So it's not about the destination, it really is about the journey. And that's why yoga is called a practice, not a performance. So with your yoga practice, every time you come into the room, you may feel a little different. So you work with whatever your body needs. You'll know when to ramp it up and you'll know when to back it off. So really start to tune in to your body and your breath. If your breath starts to get really short and sharp and choppy, that can be a really good indication that you just need to back off a little bit to get the breath back under control, and then you'll start to find your rhythm and your flow and turn your yoga practice into a moving meditation. Now, I hope that that was valuable to give you some basics and introduction into yoga, and in particular more of the vinyasa style. And at the end of each session, we also say a Sanskrit word, which is namaste. Namaste. And essentially it means the light in me honors the light in you. And at our classes, we like to close each class with the word namaste. So together, bringing hands to heart center, gently close your eyes, take a deep breath in, let it go. Bowing your heads to seal your practice, we say namaste. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you back on your mat soon for our next installment.